We can just go ahead and start. I'm Jennifer Mercer. If I don't know you, nice to meet everyone. I'm the CEO of Metazoa, and this is our webinar on org clones, splits, merges, reboots, all of the above. And Bill is going to show us or talk us through the new shell asset technology that we have created here at Metazoa. This is a big game changer, a huge new feature. It allows you to do these org transformations in days and weeks, not months and years. And you can do this with one or two people. It's really transformative. It's amazing. I'm going to let Bill talk you through it. We will take questions at the end, but go ahead and type your questions as you think of them in the Q&A section. And then we'll get to all of them at the end. This is a short presentation, about a half an hour. So welcome. And Bill, why don't you take it away?
All right, thank you for that introduction. Let me share my screen here. And can you see that?
Yes.
Okay,
And if
great.
I didn't mention, Bill is our CTO. Sorry.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Jennifer. So we're here to talk about something I care about a lot, which is platform agility. And it's being able to make changes in your Salesforce org that really help the org be better managed, less expensive to own, make sure the org is agile and healthy. And our products, Snapshot, are all about org transformation. So, I mean, if you discover technical debt, then you can also remove the technical debt right from the same report. If you are finding inactive users that are connected to important enterprise systems, you can disconnect them right from the report. If you're looking at profiles and permission sets and you want to architect them or move away from profiles, you can do that from within the same environment. So it's not just giving a report about something or drawing a picture of it, it's actually being able to change it that we're really focused on. And kind of the ultimate example of org transformation is org splits and clones, merges and reboots. These are mission critical transitions for big companies and for all kinds of other groups. For example, if you want to divide out your sales and your marketing into two Salesforce orgs, that's an org split. If you want to open up a new office in France, then that could be an org clone where you're going to get new employees for the same type of org you're using elsewhere. If you've got really bad technical debt, you might clone the org, clean it up, go through validation, and then move everyone over to this new org. So these transitions are really important. They involve a lot of people, a lot of effort, and usually on a strict timeline when this business is being divested and you've got to have this done in 2 months or whatever. And if you look historically at org clones, splits, merges on the Salesforce platform, there have been a lot of trouble. I've seen large teams of fully qualified developers and admins spend months on an org clone project that failed. The majority of them, I would say, fail. And it's always for the same reason, that they really couldn't duplicate the metadata. And so they couldn't really duplicate it. So what they ended up doing was basically creating a new org that is supposed to be the right thing. And then they have validation problems, they have user acceptance problems, and ultimately they run out of patience, time, or money, and then the finger pointing starts and the project fails. So I'm really excited about shell assets because they really solve this problem. They solve the worst part of the problem, and that is the cloning of the metadata. And it really levels the playing field, and that's exciting for our SI partners can now go compete with anyone and get better results in an org transformation project. Our enterprise administrators, if they're called upon to do an org clone, they can handle it. It won't be easy, but they'll be successful with it, and that's really important. So this webinar is really all about talking about these org transformation projects, providing resources that will be useful to you whether you're a snapshot customer or not. But also, if you're a snapshot customer, you're going to get additional benefit of kind of understanding how our tooling is applied to org splits and clones. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So, org splits, clones, and reboots. What's the difference? So, the way I think about it is that you're going to duplicate the metadata, you're going to duplicate the data, and really the difference is who goes into the new org. So, for an org split, some of your current users go to the new org. For an org clone, none of your users go to the new org. You get new users for that org. And for an org reboot, all of your users go to the new org. And so that's kind of how at least I've defined it. Shell assets really change the economics of doing org splits, clones, and reboots. So this is kind of my diagram of the effort level involved in one of these projects. And so the metadata deployment thing is just big as an elephant. It's the elephant in the room. That's where all the risk is. That's where all the worry is and the stressful nature of these projects. Because if it's a really complex org, you probably can't clone the metadata without some special help. And so but bringing shell assets into the picture, it really cuts down the effort level on that metadata clone part of the project. And what's more important is that you're going to get a true metadata clone. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is you can look at that source org and using differencing tools, look at the destination org, and you can tell they're the same. Now, my domains will be different, and there'll be some differences that you have to account for always. But other than that, you can tell that they're the same. And that means you've been successful. And that has a direct impact on your validation and your user acceptance of that new org. And I think it also simplifies management because there's less risk, it's a faster timeline, there's fewer resources, so management should be simpler. And data migration, pretty much the same as it ever was. We've worked really hard on building some great data migration tooling, and I'll show you that. But you've got to move the data. But the metadata is really the main issue here. And so what about org merges? So I'm not really talking about org merges today, but the new economics of cloning an org really changes what you can do with an org merge. I think the new model is to take the parent org and clone it, and then merge the child org into the clone, put the clone through total testing, validation, and then everyone from the parent and the child moves over to the clone org. So I think this is a much better model because you don't have to do anything to that parent org. You don't have to do anything to the child org. They can continue business continuity. They can continue operation until the new org is ready. And what about technical debt? Well, you can either clean it and clone it, or you can clone it and clean it. And so it's kind of the same story. You've got an org with terrible technical debt. You clone it, you clean it up, it goes through validation, and everyone moves over. So I think it's a better model for cleaning up technical debt where you don't have to do anything to the parent org. But don't clean up technical debt in between that process. Either clean it up and clone it, or clone it and clean it up. Don't do both at the same time because you want to get those two orgs to where you can verify the clone and that the two orgs at the metadata level are the same. And so while I'm talking about it, we have two reports in Snapshot which are really useful for getting a 30,000-foot view of an org clone. And so one of them will look at all of your data records and permissions, and the other one will look at all your metadata records. And if you look at those reports, either as an SI partner or here at Metazoa or as an enterprise admin, they will give you a sense of what you're up against. And they're a great starting point to really talk about potential problems or difficulties that you might have in doing an org clone. Speaking of which, these are a dozen issues which I want to bring up, which shouldn't stop you from doing an org clone, but you should think about these issues before you get started. Don't discover these issues in the middle of the clone. So the first one is obsolete packages. It turns out that a particular version of a managed package can be deleted and no longer available. If that happens, you can't install that on your new destination org. It's not available. So you're going to have to install another package, a version of it. And it could be that that vendor's out of business and all of their packages are gone. I don't know. But you need to look into that and be sure that's not going to happen to you because those packages have been customized and they have Apex code, which is now opaque. You're not going to be able to see it. And so, you need to look into that. The other thing is Apex development. It's very difficult to start developing Apex in the middle of an org clone. Be careful about that. You really want to develop it on the source or on the destination, not in the middle. Private reports cannot be deployed. So you're going to have to move your private reports into a public folder, deploy the public folder, and then move them back to the users. It's kind of a pain, but that's how it is. Territory management adds complexity both on the metadata side and the data side. Do some testing about migrating your territories before you get into the middle of it. External IDs, you really need them for moving data. So be sure that you're able to put external IDs into that source org, and the source admins aren't going to complain about it because you really need to do that to migrate the data. Marketing Cloud, aka Pardot. Nothing really to do with Salesforce. It has no API. It's a totally separate system. We can't help you with it. It has to be moved by hand. They do have some import and export of reports, but you really need an expert at moving Pardot. Nothing for it. Converted leads, don't try to move them. It's a giant pain. Just give up early. If you have to move them, let's talk. There might be some ways to do something there. Classic communities cannot be deployed. Lightning communities, the new communities, can be deployed with metadata. And also you have portal users. That's another aspect that you need to take into account as you may be moving a lot of portal users. Last modified dates. You can set created by dates, but the last modified dates almost always get blown away in the data migration process. Don't count on them. Deprecated assets, things like S controls and process builders, you need a plan for that. They can't be deployed, and you either need to replace your S controls on the source or come up with some kind of solution for the destination, like a Lightning Web component. History objects can't be moved, can't be created, can't help you. Code coverage, be sure that source org passes code coverage. It's very important. User migration. So let's talk about that really quick before we get into it. So you need a plan for user migration. The problem is that if you're going to have your owners and created by and last modified by users correct, they need to be on the destination org. Now, they can be inactive, but they need to be on the destination org. It's even more difficult with metadata. In some cases, metadata can't be moved if the users are inactive. Reports and dashboard sharing, approval processes, and queues are examples of this. So you need to figure it out. You need to map your users from, this user on the source is going to be this user on the destination. And you might end up moving all of your users into an active and then mapping your active users. But think about that before you get started. All right, let's talk about deployment errors. Deployment errors are not your friend. They are the thing that is stopping you from migrating that source metadata to that destination metadata. And there's really three types of deployment errors. There's dependency errors, configuration errors, and format errors. So now dependencies. There's 357 different types of metadata. And there's 1,500 different relationships that connect those metadata types. But in your org, you might have, 500,000 metadata assets that are all connected to each other in different ways. And so those are the dependencies. And the problem is if you deploy metadata, the assets that are being referenced either have to be in the current deployment or already on the destination org. So in my example, I'm moving the asset M in red, but M refers to the child asset D. D either has to be in the current deployment or on the destination org. And so what shell assets do is they're specially constructed metadata types that don't have any references in them. And so they're very easy to deploy. You can deploy all of them to the destination org. And that's in phase one. And then in phase two, you can deploy all of the real metadata. And so the reason this works is in phase one, there are no dependencies. So you don't get any dependency errors. But in phase two, all of the assets are already on the destination org. So once again, there's no dependency errors. It's like a magic trick, and you do it in two phases. So that's how shell assets work. And the problem, the historical problem has been that A depends on B, and B depends on C, and C depends on D, E, and F. And when you try to deploy A, you have to deploy 100 other assets, and then any other error can stop the deployment. And that's the deployment problem in a nutshell. So there are some other types of errors that can happen, and we're going to run into those as well. And let's talk about those. So configuration errors happen when your two orgs are not the same. So for example, if you have multi-currency set on the source org, it has to be set on the destination org, or you can't move any fields. And so then you have to be sure your feature licenses are the same, like knowledge. These are licenses you can buy. That your other Salesforce licenses are the same, like Data Cloud. And so the admin for the source org, the admin for the destination org, they need to have equivalent licenses set up. There's granted permissions. So for example, you can go to your sales rep and say, hey, I need more than 400 custom fields on this destination org, and Salesforce will help you out. While you're at it, be sure you have every permission you can have. All the data permissions, all the object permissions. You need every permission. Do not try to do this without everything, because every permission that you're lacking will be an object type that you can't move, essentially. So one trick is to actually deploy the settings metadata. You find the settings metadata on the source, you can deploy it to the destination. That will cover a bunch of your settings. Another trick is actually to just get two browsers where you have the source and the destination, and you just look through the setup menus for differences, and you move everything to the destination. It's not a lot of fun. While you're at it, be sure that you have plenty of storage on the destination, because when it comes time to move the data, you're going to have the equivalent storage on that org as well. Format errors. Believe it or not, there are metadata assets in your org right now that cannot be deployed because they've been mangled in the setup menu. So when you're working on something in the setup menu, you can do things to it that make it undeployable. And let me give you some examples of this. Here's a good one. A list view. This list view has the filter for 1 or 2 and 3, but it only has 2 filters. So what happened is somebody set the Boolean filter and then deleted one of the actual filters, and now that list view will stop that entire custom object from being deployed. Here's another example. I've got a validation rule that's inactive that references a custom field that doesn't exist anymore. That validation rule will stop that object from being deployed. So these are format errors. We're going to talk about them too. All right, let's actually do something. So this is the big picture of how we recommend best practices you conduct an org clone. You're going to deploy your shell assets, and that's going to kind of put the org to sleep. Everything's going to be turned off, which is a great opportunity to migrate all your data. And then you're going to migrate your data again. I'll explain why. And then lastly, you're going to deploy the real metadata. And then you're going to have a perfect org clone. And so that's kind of the big picture. So in terms of deploying shell assets, you need to think about your source and your destination admin. They're really important. They need all of their different permissions set up properly. And you're going to move everything from left to right. And then you're going to create a couple of folders, and you're going to resolve all of your configuration errors in this step. So let me show you how I would normally do this. Here we are in Snapshot. I would start out with a source org here and with a destination org here, and I would connect those source to destination. And then I would start out with a project here that's going to be for the shell assets and a project here that's going to be for the dummy assets. And I'll explain all of that. And then I would connect them. And that's kind of how I would put the org together. And so I've actually got one set up. So let me switch to that. So here I am kind of jumping forward. I've taken my snapshots. I've got my shell assets ready to go. Let me show you how to do that. Now, these items in green are actually just folders of metadata on the local computer. So my shell assets are really just here on a local folder, and I can set them up here on the local project tab. And the way I set them up is to initialize them with shell assets and select the right org, the same as the source org, and download them, and it will create all of the shell assets right here. And so that's an important step. And the other step is to do the same thing with my dummy assets, except in this case, another local folder of assets. And in this case, I'm going to set these up just to grab a copy of a Salesforce org. And I can do that again on the second tab, except now instead of the shell asset option, one sec here. So now instead of the shell assets, I grab this top option to just grab assets by package name. And then now I'm ready to deploy my shell assets. And to do that, I just double click on this arrow. See, this is the arrow connected to the shell asset folder. And I can select all of my shell assets at this point using our deployment tools. I'm just going to get the custom objects to keep it fast and go to the deploy tab and now deploy them. So now normally this would be like a catastrophe. You would get thousands of error messages because there's all kind of dependencies between these objects and other things, and you haven't accounted for that. There's all types of other format errors and configuration errors that you're very likely to run into. So I'm getting an error, and the first error I'm getting is account contact relation. So that is a configuration error, and I need to turn account contact relations on the destination org, right? You're familiar with that. That's the feature that lets you relate accounts and contacts. And so I'm going to get another error here, account team member. I need to go turn account team members on the destination org. But those are the only two errors that I have here deploying 400, 500 objects. So that's really just shows. So if I go turn those two things on the destination org, all of my objects in the shell assets will be deployed. And so that's really how, in deploying shell assets, you will resolve all of your configuration errors, and you have to resolve them sooner or later. So this is a fine time to do it. And at this point in time, everything in the org is turned off, except record types. They're turned on. They're active. They should be active. So this is a perfect time to migrate all of my data. Now you can turn these things on and off in Snapshot using our switchboard application, but don't worry about that. At the moment, they will all be turned off because you deployed shell assets. So we're going to migrate data. I recommend migrating users first, your inactive users, the users that you have. Then I would install any packages. Hopefully you've got current versions of all your packages. And then I would do an analysis of groups of objects that I need to move from the source to the destination. And I wouldn't move more than 500,000 objects in a single group. I think the bulk data API just gets really sluggish, and if it fails, then you've got to kind of start over with a huge data set. We have a new technology called Range Cutter. Range Cutter will give you the SOQL queries to divide up an object into equal sections. So say you have 5 million accounts and you want to do it in 20 sections. This will give you the SOQL ID ranges for all of those sections. I strongly recommend external IDs. The bulk API, some days it has bad days, some days it has good days. Keep your queue loaded in the bulk data API, and that'll help it go a little faster. I would use up to 3 or 4 total workstations if necessary. More than that, I don't think is helpful because of lock and contention issues. And lastly, our object overview report is really, really helpful for showing a lot of the progress in a data migration and when all of the data from this org has been moved to this org. All right, so let me show you some quick data migration. So now we're not going to use shell assets. We're not going to use dummy assets. We're going to go to the actual Salesforce orgs and click on this arrow. And over here with data sets, you can build data sets. And when you build a data set, you have a parent object and child objects, and you can set all that up. And the parent object you can find with a filter or a SOQL, however you want to find it. I just found one account by name. And then the children will only be the assets that reference that account. And then you can build the data set, and that brings all that data down to your local machine, and you've got a data set ready to go. And then when you've got your data set, you go back and you can migrate the data sets. And so in this case, I've got my account and the hierarchical objects. And you can have matching fields. Pay attention to your matching fields. So the account names are not unique. So I'm using name and postal code to try to get unique account matching. You can scramble fields. It's useful for, say you're setting up a developer sandbox. You can deactivate assets. So you're not sending out workflows or running triggers while your accounts are being moved. And then you can migrate the data set from this last screen. And so it will not only move all those objects and keep them connected, all the other references will also be reconnected on the destination. So it's really ideal tech for doing org splits, clones, and merges. Let me show you this, though. You may be moving millions of records, and you don't really want to use a hierarchy for that. So in that example, it could be much simpler, really. You're just moving all your cases. Or you might be moving all your cases in 4 different groups, if there's that many. And there you want that matching field to be an external ID. So that's kind of the no excuses way to match those destination records, especially if it's something like a case that's an auto name, auto number field. You really have to use an external ID. So that's how you then migrate all your data. Yet the last thing I'll show you here is on managed data sets. We have some great utilities here to automatically set up external IDs. This is the object overview report. It'll give you counts of all the objects on the source and destinations and counts of all the interior references. So that's really useful for knowing when you've finished migrating all your data. And remap fields, you can remap fields, field names and field values if you're doing some kind of transformation in the middle of your org clone. All right, so that's just a quick overview of moving data. After you've moved all the data, you need to move it again probably. And the reason is that the first time you move it, you'll create all of the records, but some of the internal references won't be available. Now, if you could move A and B at the same time, Monarch would take care of that. But you probably can't because you've got 1 million A's and 2 million B's. So you're going to be moving them in pieces and parts over. But once all the A's are over there and all the B's are over there, then Monarch can fill in those internal references. So really the simple way to do this is to move all your data twice. And that will get all those internal references taken care of. And then lastly, you're going to deploy your real metadata. And the strategy here, I call it drain the swamp. You're going to move all the metadata that you can. And if there's a problem, you're not really going to worry about it. Because when all the metadata is moved, you're going to be down to the alligators at the bottom of the swamp. And you can wrestle them one by one and resolve any kind of special problems. And mainly they will be format errors. And so if you remember, format errors are just things that aren't deployable in your metadata. And so I'm going to show you how to fix a format error. And so let's go look at that real quick. So in order to do this, we're going to look at, so here we're going to use dummy assets. Now, you could use your source assets and deploy those as real metadata. That works fine, but there's an advantage to using dummy assets, and I'm going to show you what that is. So for example, let's say that we're going to move a whole bunch of assets here. Let's just move a bunch of objects and move those into the create job list and now deploy them. And when you deploy them all, what you will find out is that there's a problem here with the task object. Now, let me show you a trick. This is a great kind of pro tip. You can actually right click that and just say remove it from the job list. And if you watch the job list at left, it actually removes the task object. And now you can do another deployment. So this is what I mean by drain the swamp. You can take like 1,000 metadata assets, try to deploy them all. And if 15 of them don't, just remove them and deploy what's left. And you will get most of your metadata deployed. And then later you'll do a difference and you'll find the problems and you can track them down. So what was the problem with that object? Well, it was a format error. So let me show you how to fix a format error. So if you've got, and I've kind of set this up here, I've got an object that I know has a format error. And when I deploy it, it's going to tell me, yeah, this is a validation rule that references a field that does not exist. And so what you do is you can then go into your dummy assets, and this is the folder full of dummy assets, find that validation rule and remove it or redo the field, whatever you think is the appropriate thing to do at that point, and then come back to this interface, take another source snapshot because you just changed the source snapshot, and now come back to deploy and do a deployment. And we just got rid of the format error that we were facing. And so that's why, at this stage, real metadata, I think using the dummy assets is a great idea. So that's the last thing I want to tell you is let's move Apex classes last. And the reason is code coverage. So one of the beauties of shell assets is they let you work in any order that you want. So you might as well do Apex last because the code coverage requirements are going to make those deployments much longer. And if you've got everything else set up, you can really minimize the amount of time you spend moving that Apex. So that's my presentation. I'm ready for some questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, that was great. Very helpful. One thing I wanted to say is traditionally, actual cloning an org has been really impossible, isn't it? Been the process that you would just build a new org, even if you're rebooting and then you're building all the custom objects and everything in there.
Yeah,
So this is a true clone.
it's a big difference. And
Yeah,
it especially helps you because if you have to rebuild that org from scratch, you lose all of the wisdom.
yeah,
And it's really a mess. So yeah,
yeah.
you really want that clone.
Okay. So someone asked, what's the difference between shell assets and snapshots? But
Yeah, so the snapshots were those blue items that are
right,
pictures of a live org. And when you take a snapshot, it comes down and then you have a picture of it. When you calculate the shell assets, and there's a white paper on the front page of our website that explains this, by the way. But
mhm,
when you create those shell assets, they download your real metadata and then they make a bunch of changes to it. So, for example, an Apex class will come down and will remove all of the logic of the Apex, but the signature will be identical. So they
right.
look like real assets, but they do nothing. And the purpose of them is to populate that destination.
And this is just a part of Snapshot, the actual product. So you're just using this shell asset technology and Snapshot together to do this org reboot, clone, merge, whatnot. And you're saying with a org merge, it's you're really doing an org merge, but you're cloning the org first. So you're not it's not affecting the production org. So
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. So one way to do an org merge is to take a sandbox but then you have to do release management back to production. And it
right.
could be gnarly. So an org merge, it could just be onboarding users, but some org merges are really recreating these two orgs to work together, and they're kind of a special topic.
Okay. So when you mentioned using a few workstations, is that more for dividing up large data sets? For example, if you have 3 million records, you could divide that up across 3 workstations. Is that more of a manual coordination uh, between each person slash workstation?
Yeah, great question. So, if you have three workstations, you could do accounts, contacts, and leads, and have just three, separate, and you might have to divide each one of those into multiple ranges with the range cutter. But the other thing is you can also deploy metadata off multiple workstations. But I have found that if you use more than three, you start having metadata contention and lock problems where, one workstation's waiting for the other workstation to finish. So really, the truth is you can clone the biggest org in Salesforce with a high-powered laptop. That is really the truth.
And just back to the org merge again, because I know that we have several customers, at least half a dozen right now, they're doing org merges, but due to there's been, it seems like a lot of M&A activity this summer. But they're cloning the org and then merging the orgs, right? Is it one and the same, or are they two very different things?
So I think the best practice is to take your parent org and clone it.
Hmm.
Take the child org, the org that you need to merge with, and merge that with the new clone. And
Okay.
put that clone through all of your testing, all of your acceptance criteria. And meanwhile, the parent and the child orgs are business continuity. They're business as usual until you're ready, and then everybody moves over, both from the parent and the child.
Yeah,
That's
that's amazing.
that's my recommended strategy.
Yeah. I mean, in the past, it's been so messy. We do have white papers on all of this on our website that goes in more detail. I'm going to get to a few more questions. I do want to say really quickly that we offer professional services, but we are not a professional services company. We have some amazing consultants and SIs that we work with who are Snapshot certified and experts on this that we like to recommend. We do have expert services that we offer by the day. So if you are doing this yourself, that's our goal, is really to empower you as the admin or architect to take Snapshot and this technology and do this internally in-house. And we offer training and support for all of that. And then we have expert services if you do need us to come in and help out with some of this. Let me just get to a few more questions though. Um, so one is, how do I know when a managed package is obsolete or my package version is not deployable?
Great question. Here's a pro tip for you. If you go into Snapshot, into the deployment tools, there's a special metadata asset called installed packages. And if you look at that asset, you will see the names of all of your installed packages. And if you deploy one of those installed package assets, deploy it to a destination org, it will install that package version in the destination org. So you get your installed packages, you look at the different packages that you're wondering about, and just go try to install them all. And if one of those versions, those package versions, has been deleted or is no longer available, you will get that as an error message. So that is a great way to be sure that that destination org that you can install the packages when the time comes.
Okay, great. So you mentioned that private reports won't come over. Does the same issue occur with private list views?
Kind of. Private list views cannot be deployed, but they're marked as mine, and they need to be marked as for everyone, or so. I can't off the top of my head remember, but they need a different marking. So that's a great example of a format error that cannot be deployed because of private list views.
Okay, and will there be a webinar that focuses on org merges? We might do that. We'll talk about that internally. You can also schedule a meeting and we can work through your org merge. And we have a report that I will send out this report when we send out a follow-up with the webinar recording that you can run on your org to look at how many assets you have that would need to be merged. And then we can help you with what that's going to look like for the org merger or clone. Just a few more questions here. Do you have a program for SIs and partners? And where is that information? Yes, we do. That is on our website. If you go to roles, it's in the top menu. You'll find information for consultants and SIs. And we love to work with our SI partners. So we highly encourage you schedule a meeting with us and look through all of that and reach out, please. You mentioned format errors. How many kinds are there?
I wish I knew. We're trying to kind of compile a dictionary of all the configuration errors and all the format errors. So, if you see some strange object on the destination, what do you set in on setup to make, these particular objects appear? You need to know. Format errors, how many are there? There's a lot. And so but we have kind of a dictionary in process. And if we get to the point where we think we've got most of them, we'll probably fix them automatically in product, but we're not there yet.
Can you use AI to explain the errors, or do the errors are they explained when they pop up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So AI is just throughout the product. If you get an error, right click it and say explain the error, and you will get a wonderful conversation with a very smart administrator who knows everything about it.
Excellent. Um, so let's see here. Why are external IDs needed, and how can I create them?
Yeah, so the way an external ID works is on the source, it's a formula field that's the case safe ID. So it's just the ID of the source object, which is unique. It's globally unique. On the destination, it's just a text field. So the very first time you migrate that object, it will create the destination object with that ID in the text field. And then you match by external ID. And then for the rest of time, every time you migrate that object, it will update the same object that it created the very first time. So external IDs are really the no excuses way to migrate data. And they're really, really effective because you can essentially just conduct massive migrations and everything will update. It will always find the original object. And if there's a new object, it'll create it. And then after that, it'll always update it. So I think they're a must.
Okay, great. I think we're done with Q&A. I think this was great. Everyone says thank you. And if you would like to schedule a meeting, we've got places on the website. We'll also send out an email, obviously, and Bill can talk through your use case, or Ryan can talk through your use case very specifically. But thank you for everyone who's joined us. And if you are in the middle of an org merge, reboot, clone, split. We'd love your feedback if you're using Snapshot and anything that we can do to make it easier. I think we've made it pretty seamless so far, but obviously these are complex, messy org transformations. So feedback is always welcome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.